Hi guys, hope you're all well. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the series A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas. As most of the booktube community will already know, the third book in the series, A Court of Wings and Ruin, came out on Tuesday. I have to say a massive thank you to my mum who waited in all day for the parcel to be delivered so that someone was there to take it in because I was at work. I got really anxious when I found out that it hadn't actually been delivered yet when I finished work. I thought it would be there quite early in the day, but it didn't get delivered until about 5:30 in the evening. I was just about to go out as well and try and find a store that had a copy because I was getting so anxious that I wasn't going to be able to start reading it on Tuesday, but as I was about to leave she texted me and said that it had arrived, so thank you again so much Mum for waiting in for my book to be delivered, you're the best. So I spent all of Tuesday evening reading and drinking tea and eating my night court sugar cookies. I found this recipe on the Bloomsbury Twitter page. They shared a party pack for the Court of Wings and Ruin release, and I adapted the recipe a little bit because it was quite a bright coloured sugar cookie, but I changed it so that the buttercream was more the colours of the night sky and added white chocolate stars and gold sprinkles so it really looked like something straight out of the book. I'll be posting the recipe on my blog, so if you want to see any pictures a little bit closer or want to have a go at making it yourself, then I will leave the link in the description box below. Anyway, let's get on with talking about these books. I'm just going to let you know that the beginning of this video is going to be completely spoiler free. I'm going to talk about all three books and then I will give you some warning and then I will go into talking about more spoilery aspects of the three books just because I need to get some of my feelings out about certain parts of it, so I need to talk about spoilers, but I will give you plenty of warning before I go into it because I know how much people hate spoilers, and I don't want to be the person that ends up spoiling it for you if you haven't read them, but I will give you plenty of warning. I'm going to start by talking to you about the first book, obviously, which is A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I first picked up from the library. This is my own copy now, but I started by picking up a library copy because I wasn't sure if I was going to like it or not, but I had so many people telling me that I needed to read it and how amazing it was and that I would love it, but fantasy is not normally the type of book that I would go for. However, so many people recommended it to me, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to give it a go, and I'm so glad I did because I loved it. If you don't know anything about this series, or you don't know what this book in particular is about, then I will start by giving you a brief outline of it. Feyre is a human girl who lives very close to a wall that separates the human world and the fairy world. However, one day she goes into the forest to hunt and ends up killing a wolf. When she goes back home, she's confronted by a beast who gives her a choice of either dying or coming back to live in his court in the fairy realm. She chooses to go back with Tamlin and she lives in his kingdom, and it just goes on from there. I could tell you so much more about this book, but I'm going to leave the description there because I don't want to end up spoiling any of it for you. This book really does need to be read rather than explained by someone like me. As I said, I enjoyed this book so much and I fell head over heels in love with the world that Sarah J Maas has created here. I love the characters in the book and I absolutely love her writing. It had me hooked from the very beginning. I think the main reason I normally stay away from fantasy books is because I find it really difficult to get into the created world, but I actually found it really easy to fall into this one. As I said at the beginning, I first got this book out of the library, so I didn't have my own copy, but when I went to request the second book, because I knew I had to continue the series straight away, there was 14 people in front of me in the queue waiting for A Court of Mist and Fury, so I knew there was no way on this planet that I was going to be able to wait that long, so I went out and bought my own copy of A Court of Thorns and Roses and ordered A Court of Mist and Fury as well. So then I read the second book, A Court of Mist and Fury, and I cannot explain to you how much I love this book. If you loved the first book, you will fall head over heels in love with this one. This book has the same amazing writing by Sarah J Maas, but I loved the plot of it so much more than the first one. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to tell you too much about what happens in this book because it will spoil some of the events that happened at the end of the first book, but if you have read it, then you can wait for me to talk about it in the spoiler section. If you haven't, you need to go and read the first book and then read this one. Honestly, this book is just amazing, beautiful, incredible. Any good word can be used to describe this book. The characters develop so much in this book, especially my favourite character, Rhysand. I loved his character in the first book, so to see his character built on so much in this book was brilliant. Also, I think the romance scenes in this book are brilliantly written. I feel like that must be really hard to write scenes like that, but they're done so well. Then the end of this book had me in tears, which I never expected to happen. I just became so invested in the book and the characters and the story. I just have become hooked on this whole world. I absolutely love it. With how much I loved the first two books, I think it's pretty obvious that I couldn't wait for the third book, A Court of Wings and Ruin, which, as I said, I had delivered the day that it was released. Again, I can't tell you too much about this book without spoiling any of the events of the first two books, but I will say that this did not disappoint. This is a chunky book. This is 700 pages long, but I managed to read this all in 3 days whilst working as well. It was lovely to see some of my favourite characters from the second book develop further in this book as well, especially Cassian and Asriel. I absolutely love their characters, and I don't think I've ever connected with characters in a book the way that I've connected with the characters in these books. They're just amazing. And again, the same as with the previous two books, her writing is absolutely brilliant and it had me hooked from the first chapter. I think I went through every emotion imaginable whilst reading this book. I laughed at times, I cried a lot, I fell apart, and I fell in love with them all over again. I read this book really quickly, as I said, in 3 days, but I don't think anything could have ever mentally prepared me for what I was about to go through and what happens in this. So if it wasn't already obvious how much I love these books, then I will let you know that I gave each of them 5 out of 5 stars, and I would like to dedicate this review video to those amazing, very clever people who recommended these books to me and told me how amazing they were and encouraged me to read them for myself. It just goes to show that reading books out of your comfort zone is a really good thing, because otherwise I never would have read these and I never would have found out just how much I loved them. So thank you so much to those people who recommended these to me. You know exactly who you are, and I'm very glad that I did. Also, if you've watched any of my previous reviews, then you will know that I like to think about who would play the lead characters if it was ever made into a film. I know that it was announced a while back that this book had been optioned for a film, but I've also read a lot of people's comments saying that they don't want it to be made into a film. A lot of people have said that they're worried that the casting is not going to live up to their expectations, or that the film is going to end up missing out really important bits that they liked in the books. But I personally would love to see these books made into films, and I'd quite like to see them very soon, but I feel like we're going to be waiting a while anyway. And I haven't really thought about too much of the casting and who I would cast as any of the main characters, but I would love to know your opinions, so feel free to comment down below if you want to tell me who you would cast as Feyre, Rhysand, Tamlin, or any of the other characters. I'd really like to know your thoughts. And on the same day as A Court of Wings and Ruin was released, they also released A Court of Thorns and Roses colouring book, which looks absolutely amazing. My birthday is coming up next month and I have asked for it for my birthday, but I'm actually going to really struggle to wait because I'd really love to get my hands on it now, but it will definitely be worth the wait if someone manages to get that for me for my birthday. Hint hint to any of my family that are watching. Okay guys, so now I'm going to go into the more spoilery section of the video. I'm going to talk about the 3 books in a bit more detail and talk about particular scenes and things that happen. So if you haven't read the books or you don't want to hear anything about what happens in the books, then I will leave you here. I will say thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've absolutely loved filming this video, and I will see you all soon. If you want to carry on watching and hear any of the spoilers and my thoughts on some of the events, then just keep watching. So we'll go back to starting with A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I can see how this is meant to be loosely based on the idea of Beauty and the Beast. Unlike Belle, who loves to read, Feyre loves to paint. She actually can't read or write, but I love the idea of her being an artist rather than a reader. I will say that even I fell in love with Tamlin in this book. Even though he didn't really help Feyre when she was suffering under the mountain, I had every faith that he was a good person, that everything was going to turn out well. The moment I really fell in love with Tamlin, I think, was in chapter 25, when he takes Feyre to the edge of the meadow to see the will-o'-the-wisps and they dance. I absolutely fell in love with him in that scene. However, saying that, I knew as soon as Rhysand turned up that first night that I was going to love his character, especially when Feyre said he was the most beautiful man she'd ever seen. Rhys actually has my favourite line in the whole book, and that is, "Be glad of your human heart, Feyre, pity those who don't feel anything at all." I definitely wasn't expecting everything that happened under the mountain. They were some of the most intense scenes I've ever read in a book, but I absolutely loved them and I flew through them because I had to know what happened next. I also loved the scene after Under the Mountain when Feyre and Rhys are talking and Rhys stumbles back, and you just know that there's something that's going to happen next, and you just know there's more to come from him, so that's why I was desperate to read the second book to find out more about him. Then we have A Court of Mist and Fury, which is definitely my favourite book out of the 3, and I think a lot of people agree with me there as well. This book is set 3 months after the events of the first book, and it had me hooked from the very beginning because you got to see how Feyre was suffering after her time under the mountain. The nightmares that she had really made me feel for her and love her even more as a character, and it was horrible to see her go through all of this and just have Tamlin not do anything about it. I really didn't want Tamlin's character to be like this at the beginning. I wanted him to realise that Feyre needed help and support and needed someone to talk to, and that she just needed some freedom, mostly after what had happened after being under the mountain. But he didn't realise, and when it got to the wedding ceremony, I think Feyre realised that she couldn't go through with it, and I actually cheered when Rhys turned up. I love that scene when Feyre first arrives in the Night Court, still wearing her wedding dress. The conversation between her and Rhys is absolutely brilliant, and I love it when she throws her shoes at him. I really cannot wait to colour that page in the colouring book. I actually love every interaction between those two characters in this book, especially when Rhys is helping her learn to read and when they share those intimate moments together. I have 3 favourite scenes with the two of them that I want to talk to you about. The first one is Starfall, which I think everyone loves. It's just such a beautiful scene, and when he asks her to smile again, I just fell in love with him even more, which I didn't think was possible. Then there is the scene in the inn where Feyre asks Rhys what he would have done if Lucien had grabbed her to take her back to Tamlin, and he says, "I would have torn apart the world to get you back." I just loved that bit. And I think everyone knows what the next part I'm going to talk about is, and that is the events of chapters 54 and 55. This is when Feyre knows that Rhys is her mate but is hiding away, and Rhys turns up at the door. She lets him in and he explains everything. He tells the story from the very beginning and then says why he didn't admit to her that he knew that she was his mate. But I absolutely loved this scene because she finally admitted to herself and to him that she was in love with him. It was just the most beautiful, beautiful moment, and I didn't think it was possible to love them any more than I did, but I literally could have burst when I read those scenes. I think Rhysand's group of friends are brilliant in this book, especially Asriel and Cassian. Asriel is quite a quiet character, but I really, really love him, and I know that there's so much more depth to him as well. And Cassian is just hilarious. I love the scene when Rhys and Feyre come back after accepting the mating bond, and Cassian winds him up and they end up fighting. It's absolutely brilliant. We have to talk about the ending of this book when Feyre ends up putting on a good show of making it look like Rhys has been controlling her this whole time, and she ends up going back to the Spring Court with Tamlin. It was absolutely devastating to read that part, and I was in tears the whole time. But then we have the chapter at the end from Rhys's point of view where he speaks to his friends and actually admits to them that no, she has not been taken away, she's gone of her own free will and she's gone undercover there, and that she has been sworn in as High Lady of the Night Court. That speech that he gives his friends is absolutely incredible and just shows how much he truly does love her, and that was why it was such agony waiting for the 3rd book to come out. Then we have A Court of Wings and Ruin, and I really liked the first chapter in this book because we got another one from Rhys's point of view and we got to see what it was like before the wall was built. I love reading his point of view and I kind of wish we got to read more of that in this book. I was constantly on edge with Feyre in the Spring Court. All I wanted was for her to be able to get back to Rhys, especially when there was that moment when Tamlin ended up hurting her and Lucien actually stepped in. That was a real turning point for him, I think, because although he's not always agreed with what Tamlin's done, this is one time where he kind of stood up against him. The first moment in this book that made me cry was when Feyre and Rhys are finally reunited. It's that moment after Cassian and Asriel have finally been and rescued her, and that moment when she's just standing there and Rhys is standing behind her and he speaks for the first time to let her know that he's there, and she just crumbles. I absolutely loved that scene. It's just so lovely to see them reunited again. I really liked how much this book focused on the war, especially the scene where all the High Lords met to discuss it. It was so intense and I wasn't really sure what was going to happen. I remember reading that bit really quickly, especially when Tamlin turned up. That was really intense and I really wasn't sure what was going to happen with some of the comments that he made about Feyre to Rhys. I cried again when the Suriel died. I didn't realise how much I loved that character until that moment when they were talking to Feyre and saying, "Can you stay until the end and stay with the High Lord long enough to see everything righted?" It was a lovely moment and it really did make me cry. Then the real tears started at chapter 74 when Cassian was really badly injured and he was sat with Nesta and he was so sure that he was going to die, and he admits everything to her and says how much he wished he had more time with her, and that moment when Nesta refuses to leave him and it's like they're both going to die together, I was in absolute bits. That moment when Elaine steps up and stabs the king was absolutely amazing. I'm so glad she was there to defend her sister and stop Cassian and Nesta being killed. Then there was the scene that made me cry more than any other part in the book, and that is when Rhys says to Feyre, "I love you," and then she realises that it wasn't said as him admitting that he loves her, it's said as a goodbye, because when she turns around and sees him laying on the floor like that, I was in absolute pieces. I couldn't explain how much I cried at that moment, and I didn't want to read on because I didn't want to read any more of a book where Rhys was not in it. But the moment when she's shaking him and refuses to admit that the bond has gone, it was absolutely horrible. However, I am so glad that that broken feeling did not last too long, because all of the High Lords stepped up and helped bring Rhys back. And I love the moment when Tamlin stepped forward and helped as well and says, "Be happy, Feyre," because it's kind of his acceptance of the two of them being together, and he kind of redeems himself, although he's done a lot of horrible things to her in the books in the beginning, but he kind of redeems himself, and I really love that moment. Then we need to talk about the ending of this book. I love that it's just left as Rhys and Feyre at the very end. I love the chapter that is written in Rhys's point of view as well, because it shows just how much he loves Feyre when he's talking about her laugh, and I love the very ending when it's just the two of them flying together as well. It's a beautiful ending. I'd love to read more about these characters, so I really hope that we get more about them soon in the future. So I think I've spoken about these books enough for now. I'm so glad that I finally got all of that out of my system though, because the people around me are pretty fed up, I think, of hearing me talk about these books, because none of them have actually read them, so I'm sort of talking at them rather than to them. And I've been filming for over an hour now, so that is definitely time to stop talking. I'd love to hear what you guys think of the book, so feel free to comment down below and share your thoughts. Think twice before posting spoilers though, because remember, not everyone has read the books. If you would like to talk to me about anything that does involve spoilers, then I will leave all of my social media links below, so you can contact me through Twitter and Instagram and things like that, so we can talk about that in private, where no one is going to read any of them and we're not going to spoil anything for anybody. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I have enjoyed filming it, and I will see you again soon. Bye!